Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with humanity propulsion engineer and author Nathaniel Turner. He is ultimately committed to living with joy, on purpose, and helping, serving, and making sure everyone knows their life matters. Specifically, he is the author of multiple books. His books, videos, speeches, and training programs have empowered countless numbers of people and organizations over the years. He has multiple degrees and a fascinating life journey. Enjoy this story.
Thanks for taking a minute out.
My pleasure.
Before we get into your life as an author and what you do, I want to know, during these last 2 years, COVID's kind of thrown everything into all kinds of different directions. And I'm curious, how did you do over this COVID period? Kind of what revelations did you come to that may have changed your life and how you live?
What revelations did I come to? That I need to do a better job of taking care of my mental health mostly.
And I think that's probably a boat that all of us are in. So creatively speaking, I know that writing is more of a solitary institute. How did you do as far as your job and creating? How was that?
So I do an interesting thing. Each day I wake up, I spend about the first 20 minutes of every day writing about my life, how I'd like it to be, as opposed to maybe how I'm actually living it. So in some ways, I know you do a lot with jazz artists. In some ways, what I do is kind of a writing form of jazz, because I just wake up and spontaneously write whatever's on my mind. I don't think about it. It's kind of a little bit like, I guess, jazz in some respect. I just wake up and I just write about the first thing that comes to my mind and try to write something that at the end might be beneficial to somebody other than me.
I think that's the thing I've learned about interviewing jazz musicians for years, is that the level of improv and spontaneity seems like it's implicit. It's something that's easy to understand, but it really is something that takes practice. And when you grab onto it, I think you grab onto the uniqueness of how everything only happens once.
Right. I hear, jazz artists say, I heard a sound, and then I made a song from some sound I heard. I may hear a word, and I'll hear a word and decide, oh, I should write about that. Yesterday, I was listening to an old Chicago song. Well, it's not Chicago, Peter Cetera, Glory of Love. And I thought about that song, not as related to a man and a woman, but perhaps the way we should be relating to humanity. And so that was the thing I started writing.
Eric Dolphy he lived in L.A., and he used to go out in his backyard, and he would play the horn to the sounds of the birds. He would literally follow the various sounds of what the birds did, and I think he orchestrated an album based on that. Musicians have kind of emulated that, so it's kind of interesting how nature is probably one of the best instruments that we have out there.
Absolutely.
Let's go back into your life here, and let's kind of peel back the layers to find out where you're at right now. Talk to me about where you were born and raised and what your childhood was like. How did you arrive to have this motivation and desire to create and be who you are?
So I grew up in Gary, Indiana. So I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana. I grew up the start of my life on the west side of town, which is much more segregated, and my family, at the time, was much more segregated. And then my family moved to the east side of town, which was a little more diverse. First time I go into school with kids who were not African American. So I was there until I graduated from high school and moved away and went to college here in Indianapolis.
I just interviewed a musician from Indianapolis. Interesting. I'm profiling him this week on the show, and he was going on, and he was really expounding, talked about the Chatterbox and talked about some other places that his name is Evan Drybread, and he's just was really kind of expounding on that. And I was thinking about, I was digging into the history, and, Wes Montgomery's from there, and there was a lot of really notable cats that were from Indianapolis, but he was very happy with the jazz scene and how everything was going there in Indianapolis. Yeah,
there's a nice jazz club here. I knew of a gentleman who used to do a number of concerts and events there at that venue. So yeah, there's a nice jazz, a jazz scene, I guess you would say, here in Indianapolis.
So Nate, if someone was to walk up to you right now and say, "What do you do?" Because when you look on paper, there's a lot going on. What would you say to them? How would you encapsulate your existence?
Today, I would just say the most important thing that I do is to work on being the person who I want to be when my time on this planet is up. So no matter what it is that I'm doing, if my work in the financial industry, it's about helping people so that at the end of the day, my life is over. that the legacy that I have in their lives is the kind of legacy I would hope for. If it's writing or speaking, it's the same thing. I want to be who I want to be when my time is up. That's what I'm trying to do each every second I have on the planet.
So instead of asking you how do you feel like where you're at right now, I guess I'm going to ask you, I'm going to modify it a little bit more in like a jazz improv way. Every day you wake up, what do you look forward to? What is it that motivates you? Like specifically in even more a broader sense.
Yeah, I wake up every day wanting to be better than I was yesterday and hoping to put together a foundation so that if I'm fortunate enough to have it tomorrow, that I can be better than I am today. More specifically, what I hope to do is help more people, be of service to more people, and have more people feel like their lives mattered because they had an interaction with me. That's what I want to do in a nutshell.
So you have very defined right and left brain things going on. Writing, and then you have, like you said, you grab this Peter Cetera lyric and you turn it into something. But you also have a degree in theology and law and accounting. You got both of these sides mingling. It's almost kind of like those circles where they arc into each other and they get shaded. How does that work for you? How do you interplay both of those sides, and how does that make you a more whole organism?
Well, I think both sides of our brains are important, so I appreciate the recognition of that. I think it's helpful, but it also can be a hindrance. Sometimes people want you to pick a lane and stay in a particular lane. So if someone's talking to me as an accountant, they might not want to hear anything about any philosophical or theological leanings. If someone is somewhere wanting to talk about something philosophical, they may not want to talk about the math and science or something. So sometimes it's both a blessing and a curse. I've just learned to live with it. It is who I am. I don't even know how else to describe it other than this is just the way that I was raised. I was raised by a man who was a Socratic thinker, and everything we did was based around thinking Socratically. But I was also raised by a woman who had great faith. So much of me is built around the whole theological and questioning and that kind of piece. So it's just who I am, and I don't know how to be anything different than that.
Do you have a quote? Do you have a favorite quote that you kind of live by, that you think about? Maybe you have hung up somewhere. Yeah,
you know what? I listened to a few of your interviews. You asked someone, I can't remember exactly what it was, but what I wanted to say was my favorite quote. You asked them about who they were, I think, and my favorite quote is this: "We're not who we think we are. We're not who we believe others think we are. We are exactly who others perceive us as being."
And, you know, it's interesting. You jump right to that, which is my therapy question. People think they're in a session when I ask them, but it's that whole notion, you know. You just answered the harder question. And I remember the best answer I ever got was a professor, and he was a longtime musician, and he said, "I want to be the exact same way with everybody, whether it's my kids or my family or my colleagues or on stage." Not exactly, but for the most part, when you run into that person, that's who it is. It's not gonna change drastically based on what audience you're around. And I thought that was a really interesting way of putting things, because I'm sure that takes a lot of courage and a lot of work to get to that point.
Yeah, it's tough. I think the point that I'm making is with the whole word "who," having conducted funerals. Having written a number of obituaries, obviously having spoken and being a part of someone's eulogy, and then also being a part of putting the final words on someone's tombstone, you are reminded that someone else is going to do all of those things for you. And the only way they're going to do those things in the fashion that you would hope that they would do is if, to your point, is if you treat all people in such a way that the things they say for you, about you, will be pretty much universal things. So no one will find it strange if they say Joe's a great guy and someone else says, no, he was a jerk. Or maybe I should use you and not me. Nate's a great guy, and someone else will say Nate is a jerk. But you get the point that I'm making, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think that's been the thing that's been revelatory for me over this pandemic time. You know, my wife and I have gone to some funerals over this time that have been, you know, loosely based, but during the COVID time. And that's the thing that I noticed. And I didn't directly know some of the people, that was kind of by osmosis, but I think that's the thing. There is a theme that people kind of stick to, that are part of their lives no matter what. So, and boy, has that mirror of mortality been flashed in our face hard and heavy over this last couple of years.
Absolutely. And also the other flip side of it, again, it just gives us hopefully a sense to live each day with joy, as I say, joy in purpose.
Absolutely. So who would you consider a role model or heroes? I mean, we're only as good as, I think, sometimes those that we emulate. Who have you admired and looked up to?
So role models growing up, they changed. There are 5 people who helped me to get to where I am. There's a gentleman, Grant Turner, Charlene Turner, Judge James Kimbrough, his wife, lovely wife Faye, and a gentleman by the name of Frank McKinney. Those people were formative. Certainly my mother and father. As an adult, the person who's probably had the most influence over me is my son.
If you could meet anybody alive on the planet today and have a conversation with them, who would it be?
Wow. Anybody on the planet. Cornel West, maybe? Yeah. I'd like to meet Cornel West.
Man, I've thought about that before because I've seen him on Bill Maher and other shows. Man, that dude is like a level beyond. Like I feel like sometimes when I interview these jazz like legends and luminaries, you know, they're like the Swamis in Cloud City and Empire. Like they're the ones that sit up and dictate what the rest of us do. Man, I almost feel like you would get lost in just the depths that dude would go into. Just explaining a cup of coffee, it's like, dude, how's your coffee? And you'd be like, boom, and you'd be like, wait, hold on, we're just drinking coffee. What are you doing?
That's true, but he's a jazz and blues man, so that he would be a good person to have a conversation with.
Absolutely, yeah, he is definitely into that theory, but yeah, he's a great guy. So let's look back on your life a little bit here. You've been down a lot of roads and seen a lot, and I'm curious if you could run into your 20-year-old version of yourself in a dream tonight, and you could give that version of yourself a piece of advice based on what you've learned throughout your life. And it's not a regret question. It's more about what wisdom have you accumulated. What would you tell that younger version?
I would tell the younger version of me to change his major and do not become an accountant. And I would say go into something in the social sciences, perhaps so you can be a professor and you can write and speak because you love doing that anyway, and you've just been convinced that you needed something to fall back on. But you shouldn't have fallen back. You should have moved forward on the thing that you felt more a purpose in doing.
So we all have these. I think the one thing too about this time that we've gone through with COVID is that there's been a reliance on art. If we didn't have art, whether it's TV, movies, music, visual, books, it would have been really hard for us to get through it. So in your life, when you go back to more of your formative years, what would you consider either a book or an album and or both that have really inspired and kind of parted the curtains for you, so to speak?
You know, it's funny because music was an integral part of my childhood, but oftentimes what I remember about music was that I was cleaning the house then. So there was all of the Motown greats that my family listened to all the time that were part of Saturday mornings and cleaning the house and those kind of things. That's mostly what I associate with music with. I also associated with maybe girls that I dated as I got older. But that's what I think of when I think of music from my more formative years of my life.
So is life being a very fluid kind of automobile that we're in, let's say we speak in 5 years from now, and, you know, especially I think more right now contextually with the fact that the world's opening up and things are going in a different direction. I know things are still scary in certain respects, but we are opening up. What would you be happy to tell me happened in say, the last 5 years of your life? What are you looking forward to?
5 years. If I could do the ultimate thing, what I'd be able to tell you is that we started what are called nano communities, and we are starting to work on a process to eliminate homelessness and income and wage inequality in this country. You know,
I think about that in relationship to Kansas City. You know, we have a very active mayor and Mayor Lucas, and in fact, I went to a gig the other night. It was called the Back Alley Brass Band. We had a Crossroads Art District, and they're a big, huge brass outfit. And he's out there talking to the crowd. He's in the middle, and he's popular. We really do like him. But I think about Kansas City, and there is always in these cities this divide, and our street's truce. East of truce, there's urban blight. West of it, it's a different story. And when you say that, I think, what are the ingredients for a city like Kansas City to get over that? What would you tell Mayor Lucas if he's really trying to appeal to get things going in the right direction. How do those things happen from the ground and a grassroots notion?
So interesting. I mentioned my son. I have a son who's in his fifth. He'll be starting his fifth year of his PhD in electrical and computer engineering. One of the things we talk about all the time is how we can create homes today for about $6,000. You can 3D print a home for about $6,000. But the problem is, which means we could essentially provide homes for everyone, and not living in a shelter, but an actual home. In most cities, as we know, the more homeowners we have, the better the tax bases, the better the schools, and so on and so forth. So I would say to the mayor, let's not provide more Section 8 housing or low income housing. Let's build quality homes for everybody, and build better schools so that people will be inspired to live in communities that are not just about zip code, but families who are raising young children will simply want to be in the best place where the best schools are, and let's put a cap on how much a home can be sold for. If it only costs us $6,000, why are we selling it for $300,000?
And I think that's kind of the idea too of having those, payday loans and check loans places. It's such a temporary Band-Aid for a pretty gushing kind of thing. It seems like that kind of mentality.
Yeah, we put together a blueprint once, and we looked at all of the elements that the American Planning Association says makes a great community. And we figured out if we could use 3D printing and solar technology for energy, we could have a family who typically could only pay $800 for rent be able to live in a house for about $150. And in 30 years would amass over $3 million in a net worth, and never make any more money than like $15,000 a year. But it's just about reapportioning where we spent money. But because life is so expensive, the poorer you are, which it makes sense, we don't give people a chance to do the very thing that helps people build wealth, which is own a home. And kids don't get the better schools because in the worst communities are the worst schools. So what if we just built the best schools in a community and use that as the driving force to get people to live there and create covenants so that you don't have all this expensive home ownership, et cetera. But that's one of the things we've been thinking about. So in 5 years, if the world were perfect, those would exist.
What's been the best fan letter you've ever received? Any response based on the work that you put out there? What would it be?
The best fan letter? I've had young people on our TED Talk say that they wish I was their father, which is encouraging, but is also very disheartening. I've had people tell me they couldn't thought about suicide until they read something or watched the TED Talk. So I guess those are encouraging, but also equally sad.
So Nate, if anybody wants to find out more about you, get your books, learn about what you do, where are they going to go on the interwebs?
The easiest place to find me is I have a website. It's Nathaniel, Nathaniel, as in Apple, Turner, TURNER.com.
So let's kind of wrap this up into a bow here since we've touched on jazz. If you could go see a jazz show, historically speaking, who are you going to go see? Who really got your motor going?
I would, well, historically speaking, he's deceased, but I would go see Miles Davis.
My only biological son is Miles, so I get it.
Right.
You're preaching to the choir, man. So I always look at interviews with him, and I've heard stories. Man, you talk about a cat that was constantly eclectic, and very interesting. He always had some great stories and insights. But what I always heard from everybody that's known or got close to him, and this probably isn't something that people realize that much, and maybe this would help everybody on the planet, they said that he was an impeccable listener. He listened to everything. Like if someone brought him, and this was back in the day before, compact discs and digital music, they'd bring him a cassette tape, and he would put that thing in a boom box and sit right next to it and just have everybody be quiet around him, and he would just focus. He was an incredible listener.
Wow. Okay, I have to keep that in mind.
Nate, man, this has been great. Thank you for opening up. Thank you for doing the great work that you do. Good luck with everything as we move forward.
I appreciate it. And in 5 years, if it happens, I'm going to call you.
I'd love to.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, and music around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.